one more guest here for this Tuesday mega show on Bang the Book Radio. That is our good buddy Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, how's it going today, man?
Man, it's going well. How you doing on this fine Tuesday?
Doing very well, buddy. Appreciate the time as always, man. I hope your week's not all screwed up by doing Tuesday instead of Thursday for us here. Look, it's our MO. We got to talk about it. I know we've done a ton of college basketball on the show, but you and I always find a way to work in college football. And today it's real easy because BetOnline posted some college football season win totals, $100 limits on these things, but still nice to see an idea of where, these teams kind of slot as we head into the year.
Yeah, I love to talk college football, but and that's mostly the case, 24/7, 365, but I got to be perfectly honest with you. From a marketing aspect, I'm not sure why they picked this week. If there was 2 weeks out of the off season that I wouldn't release college football season win totals, it'd probably be this week and next week with so much focus on college basketball. But you know what? To each his own, and they put up numbers on 25, 30 teams as some of the bigger teams, and I already seen some line movement. And obviously, I thought 3, 4, 5, and maybe even a half dozen or so. Well, we're off a little bit, Adam.
Yeah, they don't even have up conference tournament odds for all the conference tournaments, but they put up college football season win totals. So I don't know. But, if we touch on a couple of these here really quickly, Alabama and Clemson, of course, not surprisingly, at the top of the board with 11 wins. Georgia, 10.5, over -$2. A lot of people like Georgia for the upcoming season. I know you included. I want to talk about Ohio State because I'm an Ohio State fan. It's my show, and I can do whatever the hell I want. 10 wins, the number for Ohio State here. Minus $1.40 on the under for the first full season of Ryan Day. They bring in Justin Fields. What do you think about that number?
It sounds about right. Although, obviously there's some more question marks than answers. Schedule-wise, at Michigan, I know they've owned the Wolverines, but that won't be easy. At Nebraska, I really like Nebraska. In fact, I think Nebraska's season win total is a little short. On that. 10 seems about right to me. They get Wisconsin at home, Penn State at home, Michigan State at home. There's no Oklahoma when it comes to the non-conference. Very doable when you're looking at Florida Atlantic, Cincinnati, and Miami, Ohio. All decent teams, all bowl caliber teams, but Cincinnati might be a game where I bet Cincinnati against the spread, but still would be stunned if the Buckeyes lost that one. 10-2 is a fair number, and that's the number I made on the Buckeyes, so I thought that was one of the sharper numbers they had.
I am happy that they're playing Cincinnati. I'm happy they're giving Luke Fickell a crack, at the team that he used to be the defensive coordinator for. That does excite me. I like when they play, even if they beat the piss out of the MAC schools, and you and I both went to MAC schools, at least they're playing the in-state teams, filling up their athletic department coffers a little bit. I can understand why they don't want to do it in case they have to fight for recruits, but also you're Ohio State. You shouldn't have to do that. But it's good to see them play Cincinnati nonetheless.
Oh, yeah, no question about it. And again, I'll be anxious to see what that number comes out at. Maybe 17 or so, but I think the Bearcats, obviously that'll be their game of the year. I wish Ohio State had a bigger game surrounding that, the week after that or whatnot, so there'd be a little look ahead or maybe a little bit more of a flat spot. But that would be one game on the schedule I'm looking to isolate to fade the Buckeyes. But all in all, Fields, I think, super talented. If you believe the recruiting class rankings, and you should for the most part, all you got to do is look and see who gets the top classes and then go to the AP final poll, and they're not going to be too far off for the most part. But, Fields is right up there with Vince Young and Trevor Lawrence as the 3 top-rated quarterbacks to come out of high school here this century. 2 happen to be in one class, but I think, the Buckeyes won't really take a step back when it comes to quarterback. The issue is wide receiver, lost a lot of production there, lost one of the two-headed monsters as far as running back. And, let's face it. Urban Meyer is one of the best coaches in the history of college football, and now you're going to a guy in Ryan Day that doesn't have head coaching experience. I know he's well thought of by all accounts, but I'll say this. I'm not sure Ohio State's a great job to be learning on the job. I would prefer to have a guy at a major program like Ohio State to have previous head coaching experience. So that's a major question mark. And with all that said, the Buckeyes just have so much talent. I think 10-2 sounds about right for me as far as the season win total.
Well, again, very hard to hold $100 limits here for 8 months? More than 8 months, 8.5 months for these to be decided. But still, a good chance to get an idea for what the odds makers may be looking at with some of these teams. And again, as you and I talked about, accelerated timelines, and this just sort of speaks to that. So, all right, we transition back over to the college basketball side of things here, and obviously with the lead time we try to get on this show, sometimes we fail a little bit. The ACC Conference Tournament has already started as we're recording. Miami and Wake Forest, Georgia Tech and Notre Dame play at 2. Should have the show out a little bit before that. You won't hear this segment until after that. But really, those games aren't going to affect the futures odds really at all for this conference tournament. Pretty top-heavy, Virginia, North Carolina, Duke. Solid in the middle with Va-Tech, Florida State, Louisville, Syracuse, even a Clemson team that could find its way into the tournament here. What do you think about the ACC Conference Tournament, which is at a new venue here, the Spectrum Center in Charlotte?
Yeah, I mean, obviously advantageous for the North Carolina schools. I mean, Duke and North Carolina will be very well represented. As far as my pick to win it, and not going to be, breaking ground and, pulling any major surprises, I'm going to go with Virginia, who's the favorite. I think major advantage that, Duke and North Carolina are going to have to play each other in the semifinals if that's the case. And while Virginia, Florida State's a team that's not going to be an easy game, especially with the Noles, winning 12 of their last 13 games, and Florida State being tall and deep, at least that would be projecting out to be the possible matchup, the 1-4. Virginia, outside the 2 games against Duke, have been remarkably consistent. I mean, they're 22-6 against the number when they're not playing Duke. One of those Duke games, Duke had their best three-point shooting performance of the entire season. I don't know if you can count on that again. So I'll go with the favorite here. I think Virginia is the cuts down the nets when it's all said and done. And the team I'm fading is actually Duke. I mean, whether Zion comes back or not, I think if Zion comes back, they're going to be overvalued. I'm not sure if he's going to be in full 100% game shape. And without him, I mean, they already lost their center. They're playing without Zion. This is a team that's already depth shy. And, I mean, let's look at it. I mean, since Zion left that game against North Carolina, the Blue Devils are 3-3 and only outscoring their opponents by 2 points per game. I mean, pretty average looking at that. So I'm looking to fade Duke on a per-game basis, and I'll be buying Virginia.
I'm looking to fade Duke, too, and Marquez Bolden, the guy that you mentioned, who's out now for them as well, and we'll see if he's able to get back for the NCAA tournament. I actually didn't read the article. I just saw the headline. He may be done altogether. Zion may not come back, as we talked about. But also, the first game for Duke, yes, they're playing in Charlotte, which does help them, but this is an unfamiliar venue. We talked about it last week. They can't shoot the 3, and their first game is probably going to be against Syracuse. That's not particularly awesome for Coach K.
No, it's not. And, I mean, obviously Syracuse is one team that already beat Duke this year, so there's not going to be that invincibility factor for Syracuse. And, yeah, I mean, even in the second game, Duke was playing without Zion. It was a nip-and-tuck game where the Orange actually led at halftime. So, again, you're right. Tough draw for Duke. And, I mean, if they get by the Orange, then they got to face a North Carolina team that's beaten them twice already. So, and let me put to bed, it's tough to beat a team 3 times in one season. Actually, it's really not. I mean, 70+% of the time, the team that won the first 2 matchups wins the third matchup. And really, it's a non-factor against the spread. I mean, if you look at it the last 4 years, it's about 50-50. So, I mean, don't overreact to that if Duke and North Carolina end up meeting in the semis.
Now, I don't know if you heard the tail end of it when I was talking with Tony George about, looking for motivation here in these multi-bid leagues. We talk about Michigan State maybe not having a whole lot with their injuries, some of their depth problems. They just want to get to the big dance healthy. I think Duke could fall under that same umbrella. And also, too, I mean, Duke just doesn't perform well in this conference tournament. We've talked about that a lot here on the show. There are some very highly motivated teams that are on the bubble in this type of area. I think Louisville is safely in. NC State and Clemson appear to be bubble teams. Do you think that any of those teams kind of make a push here in this conference tournament? Or I'm just curious how you sort of set up your thought process on a game-by-game basis.
Obviously NC State Clemson's a huge bubble game. The 8-9 matchup that'll be played tomorrow. Louisville's a team that kind of struggled down the stretch, but at certain points had been playing like a top 10, top 15 team. I mean, they play the winner of the Georgia Tech Notre Dame game, and I think that'll be a favorable matchup. And keep in mind, I mean, Louisville went into to Chapel Hill and put one on the Tar Heels, earlier this year. So again, there's not going to be that intimidation factor there. So maybe Louisville's a team that can make a run. We just mentioned that Syracuse, a team that matches up well with Duke. It could be a team that makes a run. And keep in mind, the Orange usually this time of year make a run, whether it be in the ACC tournament or the NCAA tournament. So Louisville and Syracuse are two teams. Virginia Tech and Florida State are dangerous. Florida State specifically because, they're a bad matchup as far as their height. They're one of the tallest teams on average in the country, and they're one of the deepest, if not the deepest team in the ACC. They roll out 8, 9, 10 players, and all of them guys get significant minutes. So if we're talking about 2 games in 2 days, 3 games in 3 days, Florida State, it just doesn't impact them like it does most teams.
Now, of course, when we talk about these conference tournaments from a futures standpoint, there are a lot of considerations. But from what I'm reading between the lines from you here, Brad, you sort of just treat these individual games largely as you would the regular season in terms of, matchup-dependent betting, where you kind of push some of that noise to the side and just look at who matches up well with who.
No question. I mean, a lot of people love the futures market for these conference tournaments. I mean, the reality is, and this is what I've learned the 3 years I've been here, I mean, if you really like a team that much, mechanical parlay that sucker. From game to game, and if you don't like the matchup for a specific round, because it's very tough projecting forward, then you can, go home, but take your money and take your profits and put it in your pocket. So I just don't get into the whole, hey, this team 15-1, 20-1 offering up some value here. I just don't have a lot of conference tournament futures tickets in my portfolio. It just hasn't been the case in the last couple of years, and from what I'm seeing so far, it's not going to be the case this year. I'd much rather bet on an individual game-by-game basis, and if I do really like a team, I'm going to mechanical parlay in it.
All right, so let's look at the Mountain West Conference tournament here. Nevada, the $2 favorite, minus 210 to be exact, over at 5 dimes. Again, shop around for the best prices. Always critically important at this time of the year and every time of the year in this business. Utah State plus 230. I think a lot of people want to see the third game here between Nevada and Utah State, especially after how that second game went. But we may not get it. Fresno State's a good team. San Diego State seems to make runs in this thing. UNLV obviously has the home court advantage, which they haven't taken too much advantage of over the last few years.
No.
But this is not cut and dry Nevada versus Utah State final, I don't think.
Yeah, I agree with you. If there's one team, it's not juicy. And again, a lot of these futures aren't juicy enough for me. They're really priced in. 10 years ago, maybe we'd be talking something. And I think Fresno State 6-1. If I were to bet one in this specific tournament, that might be one I'd look at. I think they get a relatively easy game. The winner of Air Force San Jose State should be Air Force. We'll see. And you look at the Utah State obviously is getting a lot of pub for the Nevada win, but I look at Fresno State. They lost one meeting to Utah State by 1, so that was kind of a coin flip game, and they won one game by 1, so they're not going to be overmatched as the 3 seed against Utah State. Very capable of winning that game, and when it comes to the finals, obviously Nevada clear cut deserves to be the favorite. I'm not going to argue with that, but yeah, I think a lot of these teams don't have an intimidation factor. Fresno State covered against Nevada just a couple weeks ago, only lost by 6 on the road, and only lost by 10 in the first meeting. So it's not like they got run over by the Wolfpack. So I think a sleeper team is probably Fresno State. And you're right as far as looking at San Diego State. Although I wish San Diego State would have been playing a little bit better down the stretch. They blew the game in the final minute against Fresno State about a week ago, and then really laid down and died in the second half against Nevada. So had they, maybe snuck out that Fresno State game and been a little more competitive against Nevada, I would have been looking more towards San Diego State here. But UNLV would be tough. They've been kind of hit or miss. Competitive tournament. It should be fun. I'm hoping to be able to catch a game or two and get down there. I haven't been down there yet in the 3 years I've been here.
Now, I'm kind of curious about your take on this. In terms of Nevada on a game-by-game standpoint, they'll play the winner of Colorado State, Boise State, which is a little bit tricky of a game. They should get a token test, and I think that should help them. as they go forward here. There's a chance they run into UNLV in the semifinals. Obviously a big rivalry game. Last year they beat UNLV by 5 in the quarters, game that was probably too close for comfort, put a lot of energy into it, then lost by 17 the next game against San Diego State in a big-time stunner, to say the least. So with what happened last year, with how the regular season ended, with that Utah State hoopla and all that, Nevada's already in. All they can do by winning this is hang a banner and improve their seeding, but I feel like they may be more motivated than other teams in a situation like that because of what happened last year.
Yeah, that's a good point, especially if they play San Diego State. We saw how motivated they were in that game, and UNLV, their arch rival, will bring some motivation. Although I'll say this, in Nevada, if you look at bench minutes, they don't use the bench much. In fact, they're a team that is bottom 10, 15 in the country when it comes to bench minutes. So I would, if it's a second, maybe to the championship round when it's that third game in 3 days, I get a little concerned. And with so much publicity surrounding this team, let's face it, there was a lot of preseason hype. From last year's finish in the NCAA tournament. This team's been awfully pricey, and especially coming down the stretch as the public got involved. They're 1-5 their last 6 games against the number. The public's going to see a very profitable team full season, but you're not going to be catching any bargains when it comes to betting the Wolfpack on a game-in and game-out basis.
Well, and once we get to Saturday for the conference tournament championship game, unless something ridiculously weird happens and a 6-11 gets there, doesn't matter who plays on Saturday, third game in 3 days, and the semifinals Friday night, 6 o'clock Pacific, 8:30 Pacific, championship game, 3 o'clock Pacific. So very quick turnaround on Saturday for the 2 winners of those Friday games. You always want to take those scheduling quirks into consideration here in these conference tournaments. So let's talk about another one in Las Vegas, and we touched on this conference a little bit last week during our segment, I believe, the Pac-12. This conference, we'll be honest, this conference sucks. And right now, it's a 1-bid league, and that bid would go to Washington, who is the number 1 seed and the favorite here. But they're a favorite at plus 275, Kyle. Or Brad, excuse me. Sorry.
Oh, that's all right. I've been called much worse. Looking at it, you know what? I kind of like the Ducks here. But, again, 10 years ago, we're probably, with a 6 seed, we're probably getting 8-1, 10-1. We're only getting, right around 4-1 on the Ducks as the 6 seed. I think they're playing some of their best ball, 4 straight wins to close the season, including a win at Washington in the regular season finale. It's a wide open tournament here. You have the Ducks, in my opinion, with the best coach, Dana Altman. Keep in mind the Ducks were the preseason favorite. They battled through injuries, particularly their center, Bull. But and I also think it's a favorable draw. I think they'll crush Washington State in their first-round game. And then, Utah's not going to be overwhelming for them. So, this is one where I'll take the Ducks 4-1 as the 6 seed. But, again, I think 10 years ago you're getting 8-1 or 10-1 on a 6 seed in this kind of tournament.
Well, I guess I'm just looking ahead to today's recording with Kyle Hunter. We're going to talk about 10 conference tournaments on that. Should have that out tonight for our listeners here that are interested in that, and certainly should be, as we make sure to cover all the conference tournaments here on the show this week. But to go back to the Pac-12 here, obviously from a future standpoint, there are some depressed prices out there because this conference, anybody could win it because nobody's very good. So what do you do on a game-by-game standpoint with this thing where outside of Washington State or Cal making some sort of run, nothing else is going to surprise me here. So what do you do game by game?
That's a good call. And a lot of these teams are dealing with distractions and motivation issues. What way is Arizona going to go? Sean Miller basically gave his farewell speech in the last game, and a game they came up short on against their rival on their home floor last week. Do they give an A effort and try to win this? And go on a run, or is it all she wrote with the FBI investigation? USC and UCLA, 2 very disappointing teams. UCLA is a team that's playing with an interim coach. They lay down and die. Colorado and Utah were in really good spots last weekend, playing those LA schools back-to-back in altitude. I took advantage of that, but now they're not at home. Colorado and Utah have 2 of the best home court advantages in all of college basketball, but they're playing away from home. To be perfectly frank with you, there's so many question marks, and I'll have to go on a game. It's going to sound like a broken record, game-by-game basis. And the reality is, even what I saw last, I'm not sure I can fully trust it because the inconsistencies these teams have shown throughout the season. I mean, I thought I could trust Washington, and then, after a good stretch where Washington won, 11 out of 12 games, and then they go out and lose to Cal, and really didn't follow that up really that strong to close out the season, their last 3-4 games. So I'm going to have to – Oregon's the team that I'm buying, but again, my mind can probably change on that one. I mean, knowing the Pac-12, watch Oregon lose to Washington State in the first round.
Well, and I think, too, when you look at any conference tournament, if I have a team that's really imbalanced, like a Washington, look at Bart Torvik's website, 131st in the country in offensive efficiency, 18th in defensive efficiency. Utah, 21st in offensive efficiency, 243rd in defensive efficiency. Even Oregon, 127 on offense, 28 on defense. A lot of these teams set up like that, where they have one side of the floor where they're really good, the other side where they're not very good. And in this one-and-done format, you may be a good defensive team, but if you shoot absolutely poorly, you're done. You may be a good offensive team that can't defend. If you can't outscore the other team, you're done. So that's what worries me about the Pac-12 here is maybe the most balanced on both sides is Arizona State. They're 83rd in offense, 77th in defense, but they don't have anything impressive to their name either. So that's the thing that's hard about these conference tournaments. If you're really good in one area and really bad in another area, it makes it hard to back you in a game or overall.
No question about it, because all it takes is one, bad performance and you're out. And again, not used to saying this for, I'll put in quotations, a major conference. But again, right now it looks like, we'll see. Maybe Arizona State can get an at-large. Maybe a Washington can get an at-large. But, other than those two, it looks like a one-bid league. Losing, you're done. So, maybe I attack. There's a lot of disparities. Everything's going to be on the line. Every possession will matter. Maybe I attack the conference more towards the total aspect than anything here, and bet more unders than anything. Because to be perfectly frank, I there's not a team in here that has shown me consistency throughout the season, 8, 9, 10 game stretch where I can trust them to go ahead and win 3 games in 3 nights.
Well, and you look at this venue here at T-Mobile Arena. Last year, 3 overtime games, 2 of them were hideous. 69-66, 64-62, again in overtime. Arizona won 78-67 in overtime. USC Oregon State was a regulation game that had 109 points. Oregon and Utah 68-66. So, I don't know, maybe T-Mobile's a little bit tough of a shooting backdrop too. I'm not sure. We need more data for that. But as you mentioned, with every possession being so important for really all of these teams, maybe totals are the way to go. It's an excellent point.
Yeah, and I've talked myself into it. Something I wasn't even factoring in. You just put you got at least some data from last year. So I love doing this segment, and I'll be taking a look at that and seeing what the market does. And I'll say this: the Sharps they've killed the totals market when it comes to some of these. So I'll be anxious to see what the totals come out later today for these games tomorrow and see if that is indeed the case. But if you've been betting these conference championship unders, you've got about a half-hour window or an hour window tops before the line moves 4 or 5 points. They're hammering the Sharps here as far as the unders go in some of these conference tournaments.
One more conference tournament I want to touch on with you here as we go to the land of blues and barbecue for the AAC Conference Tournament at FedEx Forum in Memphis, Tennessee. Those that are smart will realize that Memphis is in this conference, so they've got a de facto home court advantage here. First time this conference tournament has been in Memphis since 2014. It will be held in Fort Worth, Texas the next 3 years. So, obviously then the home court dynamic changes a little bit with a team like SMU down there in the Lone Star State or Houston, something like that. But here we're in Memphis. Memphis took some futures love early on in the week, but this is an extremely top-heavy conference with Houston, Cincinnati, and UCF.
Yeah, I'll tell you, it's been a good conference. I fully expect them to get through, at least 3 bids, and maybe, as long as Temple doesn't slip up and wins a game or two, the Owls might be a 4th team that gets an invite to the big dance here. So it's been a really good year for this conference. I mean, clear cut, Houston is just a cut above everybody else. Very impressive win to close out the regular season at Cincinnati. To get a double-digit win there was mighty impressive. UCF was a very hot team until they ran into Fran Dunphy's final home game at Temple in the regular season finale. But you're right, Memphis has been playing pretty well. I've kind of been impressed with Penny Hardaway getting Memphis up here near 20 wins this year in his first season. So they're fully dangerous as a 5 seed. And don't look now. I mean, Greg Marshall and Wichita State won 9 of their last 10 games. They've covered 7 of those. They're playing some of their best basketball of the season down the stretch. So, I mean, a fun tournament to look at. But, I mean, if you're asking me who I think is going to win it, I mean, again, I'm going to go with the favorite here. I just think Houston's the best team. I mean, other than that home slip-up where I think the distractions of having College game day there hurt them, I think that motivates them here. We certainly saw it in the Cincinnati game the week after that disappointing loss. I think Houston cuts down the nets when it's all said and done.
I think this is a really hard one because I don't know if anybody has a good draw here. I mean, Houston's first game, South Florida and UConn, they'll win that one. UCF probably runs into Memphis, which is a tough game. Winner of that game plays Houston, so that's a tough semifinal game for the Cougars. Cincinnati and Temple, Cincinnati is probably going to play maybe Tulsa, but SMU has pedigree here. Wichita State's playing well, as you mentioned. They'll play Temple. And then Cincinnati and Temple, if they advance, Cincinnati plays at 6 o'clock Central, Temple at 8 o'clock Central. That game the next day at 4 o'clock Central. Championship game, 2:15 Central. So Houston, big scheduling advantage, but they're the road team, if Memphis winds up making it through this thing. So all these teams have really tough draws, and this should be a really good, really interesting conference tournament. What about on a game-by-game basis? What are you sort of looking to attack there?
I mean, it's a tough call because, I mean, SMU is a team that's getting some sharp money in the marketplace. They just beat me. I had South Florida the other day. Maybe looking at them against Tulsa team, but, I mean, Tulsa's had their moments. Honestly, I wish I had, a game that I'm really, looking to take advantage of. It's going to probably come later in the tournament. If you're looking overall at your experience levels and your bench, because a lot of these games, because of TV purposes, these teams are going to be at a major disadvantage when it comes to playing instead of 24 hours later. In some cases, 20 and 22 hours after it. Tulsa's pretty deep, although I don't expect them to go pretty far. Connecticut, I mean, the deeper teams are the weaker teams. I mean, of the contenders, Houston's got the deepest bench. So, I mean, I would much rather have like a Houston, if we're looking at semifinals and championship, I'll probably be on the Cougars and hopefully find some value there.
4 guests, 4 segments today talking conference tournaments on Bang the Book Radio. The last one here with Brad Powers from BradPowersSports.com. Brad, what's going on over at the website right now, man?
Yeah, March Madness. Obviously hoops oriented here. If you want daily VIP email updates where you get picks, sometimes a lot of picks depending on how deep the cards are. But you get action every single day throughout conference tournaments, and of course we'll cover you all the way through the national championship game in early April, 149, and again that covers you for all college hoops. And if we have an NBA pick, it's all there, and that's daily VIP email updates. And don't forget football. The newsletter comes out next week. As far as getting you covered for all spring, we'll have some early thoughts as far as those season win totals go, any future bets that I made. So check out the newsletter. That's $69 for the entire season coming up in 2019 all the way through the Super Bowl. Check it out, BradPowerSports.com.
Well, we'll look to have all 4 of these guests on next Tuesday as well. No shows Thursday, Friday with March Madness. Brad Powers, BradPowerSports.com, at Brad Powers and the number 7. I appreciate your flexibility, man. Thanks for helping me make this work, and I'll talk to you again next week.
All right. Sounds good, buddy. Take care.